Mr. Darryl David.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, children and young persons are amongst the most vulnerable in our society. Although 17 or 18-year-olds are likely to possess the intellectual capabilities of making informed decisions, this does not mean that they possess the same level of emotional and psychological maturity as an adult to make those decisions. And I'm sure that there are many parents of such young people who would agree with me. As such, the question of whether or not 17 and 18-year-olds should be treated as an adult when decisions need to be made regarding their safety and welfare is a highly pertinent one. Indeed, research has shown that while youth and adults may possess almost the same level of intellectual capabilities, youth are, however, less able than adults to make mature decisions that may have important outcomes in their lives. In this regard, the amendments to the Act that extend coverage to those under 18 is a positive step and will ensure that a greater number of youth are supported and protected. One aspect of increasing the age of protection would be the need to extend a duty of care to a greater number of older youths who are sent to government homes for various reasons. Now, physically, these older youths may be of the same physical build of adults, but they will likely lack the emotional and mental maturity of adults. I'd just like to ask the Minister, what are some of the measures that the government could put in place to ensure that the mental and emotional well-being of these older youths are taken care of? Also, would the government-run homes have the necessary incident management SOPs to manage older youths, as they would likely require a different set of management procedures when they get into incidents as compared to younger children who might get into similar incidents during their stay at the homes? Emotional and psychological abuse have long-term impact on individuals, and the extent of the harm caused by psychological and emotional trauma is arguably more significant and lasts longer than physical abuse. One could recover from the pain of physical abuse, yet carry the scar of psychological and emotional trauma for their entire lives. It is heartening to know that the bill now provides more comprehensive coverage to protect victims of emotional and psychological abuse. Changing the term from injury to harm may seem lexically trivial, but it underlies an important shift in how interventions and care could be given. As compared to an injury, which requires perhaps professional assessments and objective evidence to substantiate that victims have suffered from hurt or trauma, harm seems to suggest a lower establishment threshold before interventions can be implemented. This begets the question of who will determine whether or not children are at risk of harm, and to what extent harm must be proven before interventions can be implemented. And with the potential expansion in the level of intervention that needs to be implemented, does the government possess sufficient resources to ensure that all victims of emotional and psychological harm are thus provided with sufficient level of support to avert the long-term impact of such harm? I'd like to touch on resources and staffing now, and with the increased need to provide step-up care to a larger number of children and youths, and the demand for greater resources to support more victims of abuse and harm, it seems likely that the government will need to increase staff resources to ensure that there are a sufficient number of professionals who can provide interventions to children. I would just like to urge the government to concurrently enhance the capabilities of staff who are already working in government-run homes for children and strengthen the capabilities of these homes to provide the appropriate required holistic care. As such, could the government consider reviewing the knowledge, skills, abilities and other competencies of professionals who are working with children, enhance the career prospect of the profession, and perhaps even reconsider the remuneration and benefits of these professionals to attract a larger number, especially potential mid-career switchers, to enter this field? Mr. Deputy Speaker, working with children and at-risk youth is a meaningful and important work because it impacts the next generation of Singaporeans. We need to ensure that we are able to entice and retain more people with the right passion and commitment to enter this field. The government could also perhaps consider tapping on those looking for re-employment. Perhaps full-time parents or even grandparents are looking to return to the workforce. If these happen to be parents or grandparents of children and youths of a similar age, they could likely have the aptitude and skill sets to successfully work with these children and at-risk youths. And finally, on the topic of foster parents, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I believe that foster parents provide children and at-risk youth a second lease of life and another shot at life that their biological families and parents may not necessarily be able to provide. I am glad that the bill now also considers them as parents and recognizes that they provide an important duty of care to children they foster by according them childcare leave. This gesture is a significant one, and I'm sure that it will be well received, as the childcare leave will accord them with greater flexibility at work for them to provide the necessary care for the children they are fostering. Emotional bonds between foster parents and the fostered child will inevitably grow over time. I would imagine that it would be emotionally painful for a set of foster parents to be separated from their foster child once the child reaches a certain age, or when the foster child leaves their foster parents to go back to his or her biological homes. I'd just like to know if there's the option for foster parents to adopt their fostered child, provided, of course, both parties are open to the arrangement. And are such arrangements typically common? Also, would the biological parents' consent be needed, even if they have shown themselves to be unfit parents with their actions and behaviors which sometimes have been deemed as criminal? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to conclude my speech with quotes from Jean-Baptiste de La Salle, who is often acknowledged as the patron saint of teachers. In writing to his fellow brothers and educators, de La Salle said, and I quote, "To deal with young people very harshly is to forego all hope of bringing about any good." And I quote, "Have much care and affection for the young people entrusted to you," unquote. I believe that it's imperative that we should always display deep affective care in dealing with our children and young persons, especially those who are at risk. And we should be helping them not only deal with whatever immediate dangers and challenges they are facing in their lives, but also with the ultimate aim of helping them in the wider context of being able to reintegrate into society. I thus end my speech in firm support of this bill. Thank you.